let's look at this. Most people think, I want to be happy. I don't want to be sad. But can you have happiness without sadness? Is it possible? Can you have high feeling without low feeling? Not possible, right? Right?
Yes.
You cannot be really happy until you understand what is really sad. When you go to Korean movie, or at least not nowadays, but long time ago when I first came to Korea, go to Korean movie, ending is very sad. Everybody cry. Many people die, ending very sad. And through very sad, you become happy. By becoming very sad, you can be happy. But nowadays, maybe changed. Nowadays, in West Korean movie, a little bit like Western movie. Ending very happy. Everybody get happiness, everybody sing song, da, 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 da. But the truth is, you cannot have happiness without sadness. You cannot have sadness without happiness. The two are opposites. They balance each other out. So, the monk who said, great question of life and death is momentous one. Yeah, but if you are not born, you are not alive, and you don't die. That's the whole point. Of course, everybody says, I am born. But what is a birth? So we must find out what is a true non-birth. Because if we're born, we have something, but we're not born. So the Sixth Patriarch said, why don't you attain the substance of no birth? Substance of no birth. Another Zen master in Japan said, you must go back to the unborn. You must return to the unborn. Only when you return to the unborn can you be free from life and death. Okay, so then they agreed, and Yunguang finally, he bowed respectfully. But then the Sixth Patriarch said, you are leaving too quickly, aren't you? You are going away too quickly. And then he said, how can there be quickness? There's no meaning. And then they had some more talking. And the Sixth Patriarch said, you have already attained the meaning of no birth. And then Yunguang said, how can no birth have meaning? So he a little bit, this is a little like Chinese, a logic kind of style. He a little bit say, yeah, you get no birth, you attained no birth, but no birth has no meaning. Then the Sixth Patriarch, who makes the distinction that there is no meaning. And then he said this distinction is also not the true meaning. And so this is like a Chinese kind of dialectic. We say dialectic. Understand? This is not so easy to follow. But then finally the point is the Sixth Patriarch said, okay, don't leave so quickly. You stay one night with me. And Yunguang was later known as the enlightened one who had spent a night with the Patriarch. And later he wrote the famous work, The Song of Enlightenment. And he was known by his contemporaries as Zen Master Chongak, truly enlightened. Chongak, truly enlightened. Okay, then we look here. There are many cases here. And we look on the pattern of page 223. And there was one monk, his name was Shi Huang, and he claimed to have attained samadhi. And for 20 years, he locked himself in a small temple and all day sitting. He's sitting all day, kept the sitting continuously. And somebody heard about him and visited his temple and asked, what are you doing here? He said, I'm entering samadhi. And then he asked him some question about that. And he said, when I'm in samadhi, I know neither consciousness or unconsciousness, nor unconscious. So he explained his samadhi. He explained about samadhi. But the true samadhi, there's a neither coming or going, and you cannot go in and you cannot go out. So a monk who asked him, he said, this is not the great samadhi. And so the practicing monk, Ji Huang, was dumbfounded. He was stuck. And after a long while, he asked, may I know who your teacher is? My teacher is the Sixth Patriarch of Kui. How does he teach about Zen meditation and samadhi? So, according to his teaching, true nature is perfectly still. The function of this substance is not moving. The 5 skandhas are intrinsically empty, and the 6 sense objects are non-existent. There is neither entering nor leaving in samadhi. So true samadhi, you cannot go in, you cannot come out. Many people misunderstand this. They think samadhi, you must go in to samadhi. But true samadhi, his Sixth Patriarch teaching, there's no coming in and there's no going. It's just like empty space. So this is a little difficult, but after that, the Shuyang went immediately to have an interview with the Patriarch, and he told the details of the question he had with the Shan She, and the Patriarch said, keep your mind empty like space, but don't attach to the idea of emptiness. This is a point. So we must keep our mind empty and clear like space, but not attach to the idea of empty or clear like space. Then our mind is truly empty. What is an empty mind? As soon as I open my mouth to say, that's not empty mind. What is the true empty mind? So if we truly wish to find the empty mind, we have to cut off our speech, cut off our thinking mind. Then we get to the true empty mind, which has no discriminations at all. So he said, keep your mind empty like space, but don't attach to the idea of emptiness. Let your mind function without a hindrance. Whether you are active or at rest, let your mind abide nowhere. Forget the distinction between sage and ordinary people. Take away both the doer and the action. Your true nature is like this, and you are always in samadhi. So you're always in samadhi if you empty your mind and you let your mind function without hindrance. So this teaching is very much what the Sixth Patriarch was giving to people at that time, which came from the Diamond Sutra. We look in the Diamond Sutra, the Kumgangyang, and we see this is where this kind of teaching comes from. This is where this came from. Originally, Diamond Sutra. But what he says here is just goes beyond the Diamond Sutra, because he said, let your mind function without a hindrance. In the Diamond Sutra it says, without any attachment, the mind arises. But here it says, let your mind function without any hindrance. And forget the distinction between sage and ordinary people. Many times we want to distinguish between the holy person and the ordinary person. He said, forget that. Forget that. This is a distinction that is not helpful to us. It's not easy to forget, is it? Okay. When he heard this, Ji Huang was greatly enlightened. He had a great enlightenment when he heard this. And what he had considered for the past 20 years as an attainment now hindered him no more. And it said that on that night, so for 20 years, he thought he already attained to something. And this was a bit of a problem for him, because he was always wondering, did he really get it? Now, this was not a problem anymore. And it said that on that night, the inhabitants of Hebei, which is where he lived, they heard a voice in the sky saying, today Zen Master Shi Shang has attained enlightenment. This is very wonderful. That maybe the birds were talking and whispering to themselves, oh, he got enlightenment. Maybe if you get enlightenment too, the birds will tell everybody about it. The birds and the animals. Or the voice, some voice will appear and to tell everybody about your enlightenment. Later, Shi Shang left the patriarch and returned to Hebei, where he spread the Dharma to many people with distinction. Okay, so we move on to part 7.38. Are there any questions? No question, then we continue. Okay, a bhikkhu once asked the patriarch, what sort of person can attain the essential teachings of Wang Mui, the fifth patriarch? He who understands Buddha Dharma can get it. Sir, did you get it? Then the bhikkhu asks, I do not understand the Buddha Dharma, the patriarch replied. Well, that's strange. Why would the sixth patriarch say, I do not understand the Buddha Dharma? Why did he say that? First he said, he who understands the Buddha Dharma can get it. Then he asked him, did you get it? He said, I do not understand the Buddha Dharma. This is a very interesting point. This is a trick, like a trick. Behind meaning is, he did not understand the Buddha Dharma, so he attained the Buddha Dharma. This is the behind meaning. If you are not aware of it, you will miss that. He said, I don't understand Buddhism. But the behind meaning is, he attained Buddhism. He is no different than Buddhism. He is Buddhism. That's the behind meaning. Okay? There's some behind the secret meaning here. I don't understand the Buddha Dharma. I don't understand the patriarchs. I don't understand anything. But true meaning is already attained. Already he got it, completely got it, and he doesn't have to understand it. He doesn't need small understanding. That's the point. So, then we have this story about the patriarch washing his robe. And one day the patriarch wanted to wash the robe that he inherited, but he could find no good stream. That stream means water. No good water for the purpose. He wanted to wash this robe, and this robe was not just an ordinary robe. This was the robe that was handed down by the patriarchs from the Buddha. This is like the kasa that the Buddha gave to the patriarchs, and it was given to Huineng. He wanted to wash it, but he could find no good stream. There was no good water. So he walked to a place about 5 miles behind the monastery, where he noticed that the plants and the trees grew profusely and the environment was auspicious. Very good environment. Auspicious, understand? Means very good environment. And he shook his staff, that's a mistake, it should say staff, and stuck it in the ground, and immediately water appeared. Water bubbled up, and before long a pool was formed. So that means he'd take his staff, his stick, and hit on the ground, and soon water came up, like magic, like a spring. And before long a pool was formed. And as he was kneeling down on a rock to wash the robe, a bhikkhu suddenly appeared before him and bowed. So a monk suddenly appeared as he started to wash the robe. And he said, my name is Feng Pin, and I'm native of Sechan. And when I was in South India, I met the patriarch Bodhidharma, who instructed me to return to China. And Bodhidharma told him to return to China. And the eye of the true Dharma, together with a robe which I inherited from Makashapa, have now been transmitted to the Sixth Patriarch, who lives on Sao Kai and Shi Chao. Go there to have a look at them and to pay your respects to the Patriarch. After a long voyage, I have arrived. May I see the robe and the begging bowl you inherited. So this is very kind of fantastic story, isn't it? He was in India and he met Bodhidharma, and Bodhidharma said, go back. Of course, Bodhidharma lived 100 years before Sixth Patriarch, or 200 years. He met Bodhidharma. Bodhidharma, who must have been quite old at that time, told him, go back to China. My Dharma is now in China. It's quite fantastic, isn't it? And this is gone beyond what we expect. Go beyond time and space. And then he said, can I see the robe and the begging bowl? And showed him the two relics, and the Patriarch asked him what kind of work he did. I am good at sculpture. So let me see some of your work, demanded the Patriarch. Fengpin did not know how to respond, but after a few days he was able to complete a lifelike statue of the Patriarch, 7 inches high, a masterpiece of sculpture. So 7 inches, do you know how high that is? That's maybe this high. This is about 7 inches, okay? He created a sculpture 7 inches high, and it's like this big, and it's looks just like the Patriarch, like a little mini Patriarch. And he showed this to the Patriarch, and the Patriarch laughed. And this, after a few days, he made this and showed it to him. Then he said, you do know something about the nature of sculpture, but you do not know the nature of Buddha. So you know about the nature of sculpture, but you don't know the nature of Buddha. And he touched the crown of Fengping's head in blessing and declared, you shall forever be a field of merit for humans and celestial beings. You are a Pokjan, field of merit, Pokjan. We have in Korean temple, when you go into the Korean temple or international temples, sometimes also you have a donation box, and the box says Pokjan, field of merit, and field of happiness. And so he said, you are the field of merit, and he praised him. And then the Patriarch rewarded his service with a robe. He gave him a robe, and Fengpin divided it into 3 parts, one for dressing the statue, one for himself, and one for burying in the ground, which he covered with palm leaves. So he buried in the ground and he covered it with palm leaves, part of the robe. And when he then took a vow, he made a vow, this bhikkhu, this young monk, he took a vow, and the vow was, when the robe would be exhumed, when it would be dug out of the ground again, he would be reincarnated as the abbot of the monastery, and would renovate the shrine in the building. So this is, again, sort of like a little fantastic kind. He buries this piece of a robe in the ground and said, when somebody dig this again, I will become abbot of this temple. He make a vow. But this is not so fantastic, because many times we make a vow. And by making a vow, we can predict, or we can hope that some future event will happen. Many people ask me, how can I control the future? How can I know the future? Well, one way you can know your future is to make a vow. And Korean people say, "원을 세웁니다." One way to understand your future is make a vow. By making a vow, especially when you make the vow in front of your teacher or in front of the Buddha, then this vow can more easily become true. Many times the people make the vow in front of their teacher or great monk. They offer him some clothing, or they offer him something, and they make a vow that in the next life they will be reborn to become a monk. This is many times I saw people do this. They offer the clothing to monk and say, I hope in my next life I can be born as in a good circumstance to become monk or nun. So this is a kind of vow he made. And then we look in the final part of this chapter. It says here, a bhikkhu quoted the following gatha composed by dhyāna master Olun. Olun has skillful means to cut off all thinking. Facing situations, the mind does not rise. Every day, bodhi grows. So when it says that the bhikkhu quoted the following gatha composed by dhyāna master Aulun, Aulun must have been another Zen master who was living in China at that time. And this monk was following Aulun, and he described his teacher by saying, Aulun has skillful means to cut off all thinking. Facing situations, the mind does not arise. Every day, bodhi grows. Well, when you look at this poem, the first two lines is no problem. Aulun has skillful means to cut off all thinking. That's no problem. But the next, facing situations, the mind does not rise. That's also not really such a problem. But the last line is stupid. Every day, bodhi grows. How can bodhi grow? Bodhi is not like a tree. Bodhi is something that is beyond growth or death. So the Sixth Patriarch, he said this stanza indicates that the composer, the person who wrote it, has not yet fully realized his true nature. To put its teaching into practice would bind one even more tightly. If you try to practice this way, you become more tightly bound. You will not become free. So he said to the bhikkhu the following stanza, Wei Lang has no skillful means to cut off all thinking. When situations arise, the mind responds. How can bodhi grow? This is Wei Lang. I think it means the name of the Sixth Patriarch. That was his name, Wei Lang or Huineng. Here, Huineng. Says Huineng has no skillful means to cut off all thinking. When situations arise, the mind responds. How can bodhi grow? Okay, so the bodhi tree can grow, but the bodhi cannot grow. Okay, so now we finish the chapter 7, the temperament and circumstances. So does anybody have a question? I'm very happy many of you stay here for the Dharma lecture today. So many people here, it's really wonderful. And we can discuss this if you like. We can discuss what Huineng said, or we can wrap up the lecture today. We can finish today. If you have a question, please ask. I'm happy to answer if you have a question. Okay, if there's no question, then I think we wrap up the lecture today, and next time we can do chapter 8, okay?